Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming back. My name's Bill Boorman. I am a recovering recruiter. So I just want to get an idea of the room so I understand. Put your hand up if you remember having a fax machine in the office. All right, so about half of you, maybe slightly less than half of you. And that's cool. The reason I always start with this question in terms of describing what I do and how I make my living is if you can't remember having a fax machine in the office, you're a digital native. And if you can remember a fax machine, like me, you're a digital immigrant. And that has meant that we've had to learn this new world, right? And my job as a recruiter started when I was 16, so I've worked in and around recruiting for about 42 years, right? Before fax machines, before email, before computers, before mobile phones. I've worked a long time, and some things have changed and some things haven't. And my job really over the last 15 years has been to be a digital navigator, to help us take good, solid recruiting, talent acquisition practice into the modern age, to turn it into technology. And now I think we're at a stage which is unprecedented. And I don't use that word a lot, a time of change like we've never seen before. And lots of people are kind of trying to figure stuff out. So this is the big question that I'm asked every day. What are we going to do when the machines take over? What are we going to do? So there's real fear, right? There's real concern about what's going to happen. First of all, I'm going to tell you something which some of you will believe, some of you hopefully won't believe, some of you will argue, some of you will be happy, some of you won't. And I will tell you that within 2 years, the role of talent acquisition in a corporate organisation will be virtually non-existent in terms of job title. Doesn't mean there isn't a job, doesn't mean there isn't a role. And I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes sharing some of the direction of travel and what I think that role is going to be. But it's going to significantly change because the machines are taking over very, very well, faster than we ever remember. The heavy lifting, things like matching, selection, shortlisting, the machines are taking over, right? But that doesn't mean the machines are replacing. It means we're going to be in a different place doing a different thing. And that's what I'm going to charge you to think about. So what do we do when the machines take over? Because it is the end of the world as we know it, right? It's the end of the world that we know. We've had a way of working for a long time which has been based on certain things. One is 90% of what we do within talent acquisition has been talent attraction. It's about getting most of our budget, most of our time, most of our technology has been focused on how do we get enough people to apply for our jobs so that we end up with enough of them who get hired and meet the demands of the KPIs and the insistence of our organisation. But actually the world's kind of ended. It's changed a lot for us in terms of what's going on because for the last 2-3 years, we've been in a crisis of crisis. We've had everything thrown at us, right? Everything from the COVID period, remember that? That was kind of interesting. So COVID times coming along. Then there was the invasion in Ukraine and that had a massive impact on the economy. We've had recession. We've got recent terrorist events, which I think is going to create a lot of political uncertainty. We've had all kinds of things going on which have created crisis. And the one certainty we have, we talk about global warming, the environment, whatever it is we know that we are in a constant state of crisis, that every month, every year, there will be something going on which will impact the way that we have to think and work. And that says we have to change. We have to change and react to those crises. The one thing you have to be is very agile. You have to be changing to the world around you or else you become extinct. So we know we're facing a crisis. The two biggest crises we face, first of all, is in a lot of organisations, I'm sitting down with enterprise organisations, talking to them every day, and people are saying to me, we have a problem with our talent acquisition strategy. And I'll go, right, what's that? And they go, we've run out of people. We've actually run out. Our job has been to bring new people into our organisation, and there isn't any left. Now, We could try and nick or steal a few people from our competitors and move them around, shuffle the cards a bit. And we're doing a bit of that quite well at the moment. Usually it means you have to increase some salaries, pay a bit more money. And we could do a bit of that, but actually our old ways aren't working. There's not enough people. We keep throwing money at it, coming up with new things, but unless we change what we do and how we think, we're going to have a problem. On top of that, we have tech disruption like we've never seen. Right? For 10 years, I've been talking about AI, massive language model, and I've been talking kind of like the future. I've been saying to people, this is what's coming, and it's almost been fantasy, like this is happening. Suddenly, November last year, ChatGPT came on the scene, had 1 million users within 3 hours, and suddenly disrupted and changed the way that everyone could do things. So now we're in a stage where the technology is a reality in changing the way that we work, in changing the way that people look for jobs, changing the way that people apply for jobs, the fundamentals of what we do. That means we need to think a little bit about what we're doing. We know the tech is disrupting us, but we also know there's no people left. In a lot of our fields, it's like a zero-sum supply chain. It's saying, right, I'm going to address a market and there's zero unemployment, right? Most of the major economies, France is the only exception, and there's reasons for that. Most of the major economies have zero unemployment. And yet, we're close to recession. So the laws of recruiting says when the economy is bad, there are lots of people in the market and there's not a lot of jobs. That's what should be happening. But it's not. It's not, because there's not enough people. So we have to think about people, and we have to think about what we do, and we have to properly think about what our role is in this world. What do we do? How do we move ourselves forward? And this is what it is. That isn't a picture of me, although it could be. Kind of could be. I asked Bright AI to come up with a picture, and that's what it showed me. I said, can you show me a picture? It's actually Charles Darwin, but I've used Charles Darwin because this is an evolution, not a revolution. This hasn't suddenly happened, right? All these things are going on for people who watch the market closely, have seen availability of candidates going down, becoming harder to attract people, things like our traditional advertising not working in the way that it did, candidates not behaving the way that we think they should. So we've seen all of these challenges, all of the things that we thought were wise and good 2 years ago actually turn out to be not that great. So I'm going to challenge some of that and tell you what I think the evolution is. Because where we're at right now, and this is a really important one, right? And I'll give you some data behind it. And it's a really good thing for everyone in the room, by the way. This is a really good point for you to think about. Up to 3 years ago, in my network, and I have a pretty big network globally, I knew 3 people who went from head of talent acquisition, director, SVP, whatever they were called, to CHRO. And the reason that is important is the CHRO is the person who sits on the board. And normally the CHRO is the head, and then they have talent acquisition, and they have learning and development, and general HR, maybe payroll, compliance. They have different departments reporting into them, but the key thing is they don't have that. What's happened in the last 3 years is 70 people in my network, most recently, 70 people in my network, and 27,000 people on LinkedIn have changed their job title from talent acquisition to chief people officer. Sounds like semantics, right? And some of you in the room will already be going, yeah, that's the job that I've got. I'm now the chief people officer. And the chief people officer is replacing the CHRO and has the board seat, which means we have the access to money and power to do things, right? And talent acquisition, however much people said they love people, was never quite big enough to have the power in the organisation. We were a supply chain function. However high you were, however well you got paid, it was about, can you get enough people in the pipeline, rinse and repeat every month, do the same thing, right? But now it's changing because the power's been given to say, this organisation is all about people. Why is it all about people? Because we've run out. Right? It's exactly the same as environmental crisis where we're going, maybe we need to switch to electric cars instead of petrol and all this kind of stuff. That's what we're facing in talent acquisition. We're saying the people have run out, so if we keep doing the things we've done, they're just going to get more expensive and harder to hire, and we're not going to do a very good job of it. We're going to have to change what we do through people. We're going to have to think about our world looking quite different. So we spent a lot of time working on employer brand, right? We spent the last decade working on employer brand, thinking about it. But what have we made our employer brand? We've actually made our employer brands disqualifiers, not qualifiers. Our employer brands turn off more people than they turn on, right? And really, most of our employer brand activity was putting lipstick on a pig. How do we make our organisation look sexy in the world, thinking people are going to follow us and change us? But when we watch the candidate behaviours, they're not following brands like that. They're not doing that. So we could say, okay, let's not take care of employer brand anymore. But candidates are all over employer brand when they get a positive reaction from you. When the minute, and I know I've just done an experiment for an ATS called Olio, where we measured 15 million applications. And of 15 million applications, 0.5% of those applications actually got in the first stage of the funnel, right? We attracted a lot of people who weren't qualified, who could never work for us. And that's getting worse. But once they got a positive response, they looked more at the employer brand than they ever did. They were just looking at it in new eyes. They weren't looking at it to say, is this a company where I want to work? They were looking at it through the eyes of, is this a company where I don't want to work? Does this information you're giving me give me a basis to disqualify it? So we started looking at it and thinking, okay, so if it's not about employer brand, what is it people want to see? It's all about job brand. All about job brand. It's the employer brand through the lens of the job. What people are interested in. What's the job? What's the positive? What's the negative? Where does it go? So we think about job brand attracting, and we think about what really attracts people. What really attracts people is learning content. That's what brings people to organisations. What am I going to... I'm coming here for 2 years, 3 years. I'm not looking at a career. I'm not expecting to stay here forever. What am I going to learn when I get there, and how are you going to make me more employable in 3 years' time when I start looking for a job again? That's what the data tells us you're going to do. That's the reality. Can't fight that. So what attracts you is what you're going to learn. So our job brand becomes all about, you do this job, you will learn these things. We will enhance these skills. We will make you better. So we get together with the learning department and say, actually, you've got all the content we need. You need to create all the activations, all the webinars, all the learning to share what we do through learning content, because that's what people are not interested in our day in life video, but they're really interested in this webinar that might make them better at stuff. This is these events. So we team up with the learning team. We bring learning and TA together. And then we've got this other thing in the people role, which is new to TA. It's only really been coming on board in the last 2 or 3 years, is saying, because we've run out of people, we're actually going to start giving you responsibility for internal mobility now. And we're going to start thinking about targeting you for retention. And we're going to ask you to source inside the organisation before you source outside. Now, when that comes to you as a responsibility, when you work in TA, the first thing you're likely to do is hire internally in exactly the same way you do externally. You look at who can do the job now. We create an internal career site. We do a bit of advertising and outreach internally. And then within a short period, and that works for a while, and then within a short period of time, we go, actually, now I need to be starting to work on new things. Workforce planning. I need to be able to say, right, this is what our workforce needs to look like in 12 months or 18 months' time. This is what it needs to look like. The other thing I look at is saying, right, I've got the organisation saying there's no one out there, so we're going to have to start developing. We're going to have to start training. We're going to have to start career pathing. We're going to have to start building an infrastructure through what we used to call talent acquisition, which is not just about today's employees, but retention and keeping people, which means learning, career pathing, new skill acquisition comes together with TA. Both functions disappear under people. Right? And this is the direction of travel. So internal mobility makes organisations sticky. The other thing is, 2 biggest problems organisations face today. I was in a a retreat with about 50 top talent acquisition leaders, organisations like EY, Amazon, they're global heads. And they basically said there are two big problems we have today. Two big problems we have today. They said, number one is because of ChatGPT and the way in which candidates are using ChatGPT to apply for jobs, every CV looks the same. If we have 1,000 people apply for a job, 1,000 people passed our screening questions because candidates move much quicker than organisations. They're using it to apply for jobs today. The other one was cheating. People are what they view as cheating in the process, right? And they're able to jump the process. So what becomes another really key part of what we're doing in talent acquisition is assessment, and where do we put that? Because currently we put assessment about 2 or 3 steps down in the hiring funnel, right? Actually, it needs to live above the hiring funnel. We've got to look at how do we assess people, because I truly believe, actually, after talking about it for a decade, CVs are going to disappear because they're not going to have any value, because everyone can now, with technology, produce a CV and an application for a job they've probably never looked at, never seen, not done any research, and based on their history, they're able to apply for that job. This is what organisations are finding in their thousands. Right? Big deal, big deal. So we're now thinking about assessment. The other really good bit is the big graduate hires in the UK, the top 5. And I said, how are you dealing with this? They said, you know what we've had to do? I said, what's that? They said, we spent the last 10 years making all of our assessments digital. We've pushed them all online, and that's what we've done, and we've had economies of scale. They said, for the first time, we're actually hiring people to run assessment centres in person, because we can't tell the difference with people, so we have to get them back in the people process. So now that's great for me in TA, because I'm now saying this is about people. I don't have to validate what people have done or what their skills are, because I'm doing all that digitally. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to do that heavy lifting anymore. What I need to do is come later in the process and spend more time saying, right, let's find out what you're about as a person. Let's find out whether you're right for this, wrong for this, what your ambitions are. Let's talk internally. Where do you want to go? What's your future look like? Let's talk about how we help you navigate that. How do we mobilise, not manage, how do we mobilise that process, right? So as a people leader, that's what I'm really thinking about, is that actually all of this technology coming in that's going to do matching, it's going to do sourcing, it's going to do attraction, it's going to do a lot of the stuff a lot better than we do, with a lot less bias, with a lot less of the problems, with a lot better candidate experience. Amazon are hiring in the US, in a particular state that I just looked at, 25,000 people, and there's no interview in the process. The first time they meet someone is on their first day of work, when they do their people assessment and figure out where they fit in, right? That's what's possible. Amazon's Amazon, I understand that, but it's also something we can think about. Our assessments, where are they going to fit in our process? Our understanding people. Is it going to threaten us? Is it going to threaten TA? I'll tell you a little story from outside of TA. Some people heard this earlier. A friend of mine runs innovation for McDonald's globally. And when they brought in the automated tills, everybody thought that means people are going to get fired. It's just going to mean you hire 20 less people. Actually, they hire more people per store. The reason they do that is because the machines process quicker, which means they need more people they need 4 fryers instead of 2, and all this kind of stuff. And they were able to introduce customer service, table delivery, things they never thought they'd be able to do. Now, I believe that thought means we can reimagine in the people role what we do. If we didn't have to spend our time chasing hiring managers, doing matching, looking at long list to short list, if we could change all that through technology and deal with people in terms of their whole careers rather than just the entry point of it where we live right now, power to the people, we have a much better future, because that will make everything sticky, that will make everything work, but it will give you the power for a future career. Thanks, everybody.